Welcome back to the table. Today we've got the third game in the Nemesis trilogy sitting here on the table. Yep. We haven't played it on the table here. We have played it on TTS. We have the game set up to play again, but we did just play it on TTS, and we have some information to share. And what we wanted to do is focus on the big differences. There are some similarities, obviously.
Significant differences,
but
though.
There are some big differences. This is Nemesis Retaliation, and the name in itself implies you're taking the fight to them this time. It's not so much about survival as it is going on the offensive.
Yeah, Nemesis and Nemesis Lockdown, they had differences, but they were still thematically very similar. A lot of what you were doing in those games was the same kind of a survival game. Now, that survival aspect still exists in here.
You do have to survive.
You do still need to survive, and there is some new challenges that they've actually presented in this game that we'll talk about. But the theme is a little bit different. You're not just, everyday workers who are trying to survive an alien invasion. You are fully equipped Marines who have come into the station to clear it of its alien infestation. So that alone is like a huge difference in that you're actually going to be using weapons and grenades and guns and ammo and all the stuff that you wish you had in the other games. You're just going to start with that here.
And one of the things innate in that too is the fact that you're not in a place where you've been working, you're going to a new place. Yeah. So the exploration is a little bit more intensified here. In the old games, you did have tiles that you were flipping, so you're sort of discovering what rooms were where. And you do that here too, but as you can see, the board starts with no tiles on it. It has this sort of framework that you're going to build within, and you all start here on the landing zone, but from that point forward, you're literally going to explore not only the rooms, but the hallways themselves, which is a big difference in this game.
Yeah, well, it's a huge difference when it comes to planning out what you're trying to do, because you still do need to have objectives that you're trying to accomplish. There's a certain number of objectives that require you to survive. You can try to clear the zones and get back to the landing zone here to get out. You can try to get to this hibernation area.
Hibertorium, I think is what they call it.
But all these things are going to cause you to have to explore the map at least to a certain level in order to complete the objectives and then try to get back out. And in regular Nemesis, you can kind of make a path. You kind of know, you might not know what's going to be in the room, but you can see your exits and entrances. This game, you don't even know what it's going to look like until you move into the next room.
Well, yeah, in fact, you don't even know what direction you're going to. If you're wanting to go to the Hibertorium, in fact, you may get there as you explore in that direction, but you may actually even get into a dead end. There's not a lot of that, but depending on how the map builds out, it can actually affect that. And speaking of the mission objectives, there are different ones here. It works quite a bit differently in this game. This is one of the, I think, the not so in-your-face differences that I think is actually a pretty significant one.
I think, and thematically, it's very significant.
Yeah, so there is a few different main objectives, and you randomly pick one of those and lay this out. For instance, this one here says the reactor must be shut down, so we need to find the reactor. That's over in the far section of the board necessarily, because it's in the C tiles. And all basic A rooms must be explored, so you have to fully explore this A section, and the board is broken up into A, B, and C. More on that later. This is the sort of public objective that everyone can work towards. And everyone gets 2 objective cards again, but one of them is effectively just tied to whatever the main objective is, which is effectively the co-op version of the game, or you can choose the other one. The big difference about when you make this choice is significant in this game, because in the past, it always happened when I think the first alien came out on the board.
You have to choose which
everyone at the table would have to choose one, and usually those objectives were specific to you. You had 2 different options. Both of yours were different than the other players. In this case, one of them is the same as every player. The other one is different, and those are like what you'd expect from the other Nemesis games. The biggest difference, though, is when you choose these.
Yeah, it's very thematic, I think, to what's going on here. Like this idea that you're a team of Marines coming into this, but everybody has their own agendas. So you can, you can just turn in your card at any time and say, or commit to this card and say, I've decided to work as a team.
You don't want to say that out loud.
You don't want to say it out loud necessarily.
But that's what you're doing.
But you're committing to that, or you're committing to your other objective, which in this case is to find and kill the Queen, which is a new enemy type introduced in this game. These 2 objectives don't necessarily conflict, but they also don't go hand in hand, so to speak. Some people are just trying to complete the main objectives. Other people are trying to do their own secret thing, which could be PvP related as well, pitting them against another player. The thing is, you don't know what a player has committed to, And if they haven't committed to either one, then their allegiance could go either way. And I think you're going to be debating as you see the game unfold. It gets a little bit more obvious which of these two objectives you're going to want to commit to, but you can commit to it at any time.
Even the end of the game.
Even right at the end of the game. However, when you commit, you do get a bonus. Kind of you get to draw some cards, so you get a better turn. So it is very tempting when you're like short on actions. Just, okay, I'm going to just make a decision. I'm going to commit to one by placing it face down, discard the other one, and at that point then, you cannot swap. Now it's face down. You can say whatever you want, though. I could tell David, you know what, let's just do the cooperative thing. Meanwhile, I'm trying to put a knife in his back. But, you kind of have to determine, just like in the original Nemesis, try to figure out what everyone is trying to do to see who you can actually trust and rely on.
Yeah, it's really cool. It makes that a decision because, like Ryan said, you do get to draw up cards, which if you've ever played Nemesis, you know that in any given turn, you're like, oh man, if I only had some more cards.
Yeah.
The first person to do so gets 4 additional cards, and then you move the little marker down, the next person gets 3, and so on and so forth. So the longer you wait, the fewer cards you're going to get when you do it. But the longer you wait, you're hedging your bets, and you can basically choose between either at the end of the game, depending on how things are going.
Yeah, and I think that element of whether or not you can trust your fellow Marines kind of weaves through the whole game. In fact, there is a whole deck of action cards, and these are just like in the other Nemesis games. These are the actions you're taking during the game. But there's actually a special action card that's brand new called Chain of Command that actually allows you to give orders to the other players at the table. So if you are in a situation where you think one of the other players may be committed to an objective that's against yours, you can actually play a card to force them to act a certain way that might benefit you more than them, which again, that's another very interesting twist.
Now it brings into note, though, that there are these different character classes you can choose from, and they all have a rank.
Yeah.
So that Chain of Command card does have some implications to what character you've chosen. And we said earlier, you're all Marines, that's true, but you're not all the same. They're not all built the same. Just like the original Nemesis games, you have very unique action cards that you're going to be using. One of the things you're going to be using your action cards for is to move, just like normal Nemesis. And when you move in this game, like we said, it truly feels more like exploration. You're going to take a card off of the top of the exploration deck and flip it over. This card is going to show you what type of room, and you're going to follow this from top to bottom. It tells you what tile stack to pull your room from, and then you have to sort of say, I'm going in this direction. So we would leave, maybe go due east from here. And then it's also going to show you what hallways are off of the new room. So for instance, if I'm going this way, I'm going to add a hallway, again, random hallway, because the hallways have different numbers attached to them, which if you've played Nemesis is associated with how the intruders come into play.
The aliens, effectively.
Then in this case, it says place an A, B, or C room. I'm in the A section, so I would choose and take the top tile of the A room and add that. And then you simply add the hallways off of that room. So it's going to get another hallway here, and another hallway right here. And this card also tells you like where the noise goes, if the room is malfunctioning, all those sorts of things. And there's a few more things, directions to follow at the bottom of the card. So really, I could have flipped a totally different card, and this would have looked completely different. It could have had a bunch of hallways going off it. It could have had very few hallways.
It could have been that dead end that you referenced.
It could have been a dead end. And the thing is, the dead ends come into play. It's not so much on the card itself that shows the dead end, but depending on where you are on the board, if you're towards the edge at the top, and there's 2 hallways going off the top, you don't place those if you can't. So that is how you do that, and then you're going to move into that room. The other cool thing I thought about moving, in the original games, there was sort of careful movement and there was movement. This is somewhat similar, but instead of careful moving it, they call it move and secure. So you're going to, if you move, it's 1 card. If you move and secure, it's 2 cards, and then you take one of these security tokens and place it in that room. Again, this kind of emphasizes that Marines.
I love that idea. Like you're kicking down the door, you're pointing your gun, you're like, all clear, you know. And those security tiles are going to, security tokens are going to be very helpful because just like in Nemesis, you are, as you explore, you're not just finding items and weapons and better rooms. You're also finding disasters, and you're fighting these intruders. And these intruders are going to pop up either randomly when you roll a die and you trigger off some noise as you're moving around, or some of the cards, some of the exploration cards just might spawn intruders randomly. And unlike the first Nemesis, you're going to be finding a lot of intruders. That game was like, if one is after you, you're in trouble. You're a little bit more equipped in this game. You've got weapons, you've got ammo, you've got grenades, but they're going to throw like 6 aliens against you at once. And so the stakes and the scale of this game have very much increased. And so as you're moving through these corridors, you could be ambushed at almost any time.
Yeah, it's really cool too. The corridors can also be secured. And depending on how you pull those corridors out, it can be both sort of good and bad. In this case, I drew randomly 3 1 corridors. Now that's fantastic if you roll the noise die and don't roll a 1. Not so much if you roll that die and you get a 1, because then you're going to be pulling a token out of the intruder bag, and for each token you're going to be populating each of those hallways, and you flip the token, you pull the token, it tells you what kind of intruder it is, then you flip it over and tells you how many of them are. So very quickly, I could be staring at 3 hallways with maybe 3 or 4 intruders in each of those hallways.
Yeah, of course, like that sounds scary if you're thinking of basic Nemesis rules, but in Retaliation, they actually give you a lot more tools to fight off against that. First of all, in the older games, we never saw aliens in the corridors.
No.
Which is cool because you can just shoot into the corridors. You can just blindly shoot. There's a die that you can roll, and you just take out that many of the intruders in that corridor. Now, you can also fight enemies that are in your same space. That's a little different. It's going to be a little bit more of like a close counters fight. You've got to be more careful. You're going to have to actually probably use some special cards. You're going to be using your ammo tokens to try to shoot, and you have to be a little bit more accurate. But they have changed the whole combat system in a certain way.
A little bit.
It still feels like Nemesis, but they definitely streamlined this combat.
It is. Along with a lot of things about the game that they streamlined, combat is one of them. You are just rolling dice for the most part, except for the queen. And when you roll dice, it kind of incorporates that whole concept from the old Nemesis of flipping a card and finding out how much health the intruder had. So they're all different, and you never know. Some people like that, some people don't. I always liked that because I thought it was very thematic for a very thematic game. In this case, you're rolling die, you're adding damage to the intruders, and then when you attack them again, if you roll that amount of damage that you've given them or less, they will be taken out.
Yeah.
But if you roll higher than that, they aren't. So what it effectively does is the more you're attacking it, the higher that number is, and the more likely it is that you're able to knock them out, which I think is actually a very cool and interesting mechanic.
Yeah, it is very interesting. And of course, like you're managing resources, even ammo. So like David was saying, you have ammo, you can shoot things, you can roll that dice multiple times in trying to kill it. But a lot of weapons have special alternate fires, or that you have cards that have special abilities that actually consume your clips. And this is another thing that feels very thematic. When you're embarking on a game of Retaliation, you're setting up your character to start with. David already mentioned that you have your unique deck of action cards. You're going to start with a unique item. You're going to draft a second item, but then you're going to start with this tactical belt, which can hold 4 kind of special items. And there are 3 to choose from: extra ammo, grenades, and extra oxygen, which we haven't even talked about. But you have to kind of choose the setup that you're going to have coming into it. Now, you can always return to the landing zone to restock, but you don't want to do that very often. So if you're going to be going combat heavy, you might want to stock up on a lot of ammo, but oxygen is something that's really helpful that allows you to move farther into the facility with less risk.
Yeah, and while we're talking about ammo, it does work quite a bit differently than the other Nemesis games. Ryan mentioned clips earlier. The tokens represent a clip, and in most cases, when you're shooting an alien, a single intruder, you're going to be not spending your ammo.
You just have to have it.
It's a big difference. If you have ammo, you can do a 1 shot against 1 intruder and you're fine. You don't have to take it away. Of course, you're Marines. You're not going to like run out of ammo like you are a survivor in the other ones. However, those alternate fires and some of the other things you want to do, like when you're bursting ammo into a hallway, that's going to use a clip. So it says spend a clip, in which case you do actually get rid of the clip token or flip it over. Each clip has 2 uses effectively, and once you use it twice, it's gone. Otherwise, you can sit there and just one at a time take them out. The problem being, these intruders aren't coming one at a time. There's a lot in the hallway, and when you're in a room and you've got hallways full of intruders, it's very, very tempting to go, you know what, I'm just going to stay in here, I'm going to burst in this hallway. And you might get lucky and take out 4 of them. You're taking them out a bunch at once sometimes. And sometimes you don't roll so well and it doesn't go that way. But it really does give you that feeling of the intensity of like just taking out a bunch of enemies. the intensity is even heightened with that oxygen aspect, because I think that kind of, for me, replaced the tension of running out of ammo. It
does, yeah.
Because you have a limited amount of oxygen when you come in here, so you can't breathe freely.
Yeah.
And you're going through, and at the end of every turn, you have to take your oxygen down.
Even your rest turn. Even when the turn you're resting,
even when you
pass, still need to lose oxygen.
When you pass, you still you lose oxygen. So, and that goes far quicker than I anticipated when we first started playing.
I feel like it goes quicker even than the ammo in Nemesis. Like you could, if you do that thing, especially that's something David was mentioning, like why you don't want to just sit there and fire at one guy over and over again. You want to be efficient. You want to be quick, because in each of these sections, A, B, and C, there is a switch that turns back on life support for that particular section.
That you have to find.
But you have to find it, and then you have to activate it. So the quicker you can turn on oxygen in A or B, you get to breathe a little easier, literally, and then you can start maybe taking your time. But until you find those stations, you literally are. I think you start with like 7, and you're literally watching it tick down with every action, every turn you take. You're losing that oxygen, and it gets very scary when it gets low.
It goes down very fast, and back to what Ryan said about your tactical belt. At first, I thought, I'll take an oxygen, and then I'm going to take mostly ammo and a grenade. I look back and kind of wish I may have taken 2 oxygen. Because in our gameplay on TTS, I had to run back to the landing zone to try to get to oxygen. Spoiler alert, I didn't survive that at all. So it is still a challenging game. It's balanced differently in such a way where you have more ammo, but there's a lot more intruders. So the tension is still there for sure, and that oxygen just really felt, no pun intended, or maybe intended, suffocating for sure.
Right, for sure. And so if you couldn't tell by now from some of the things that we've talked about, they did definitely streamline this game in a lot of different ways. The stuff like the way you're doing damage is streamlined. The way that you're using some of these items is very streamlined. And in addition to help streamline the game even farther, they give you this, which is something that probably should have come in every single version of Nemesis. This is a little cheat sheet that you just set up on the table, and it tells you
for all the processes for pulling a intruder token.
For all the processes, there's a lot of things that are going to have you pull an intruder token, and sometimes the name on this one side matters. Sometimes the number on the other side matters.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it doesn't. This is going to tell you exactly every time you pull a token. It's going to tell you what you do when you pull that token. This alone has saved so much flipping through the rulebook.
Oh, for sure. Whenever I played Nemesis, I had to flip through the rulebook specifically for those moments. The other thing they did, and this is sort of a more subtle improvement, but they have an HP track at the top of your player board, and every time you're going to take a hit from an alien, you're just going to move across that. This also has places for those serious injury cards. So when you take a serious injury card, it's necessarily going to push your marker up to the next section. And it's a more intuitive way to follow along with this in terms of the injuries and how all of that works.
Yeah.
I do think this is effectively their chance. It's their third time around. They wanted to not only make a different feeling game, but they also wanted to perfect or try to perfect a lot of what was happening in those games.
Well, yeah, I think we got to meet with Adam and talk to Adam. He even said like this whole idea of turning in your objective card whenever you want. He said that even he would go back and play with that with the older games because he likes this system so much. And so that's pretty much all the new stuff. There's a few other new things that we didn't really talk about. There's some new intruders, including the drone. And then ultimately the queen, which is something we've never seen before. You can take the fight to the queen. And in fact, my other objective is to defeat the queen, which the queen is like a whole boss. I mean, she has her own deck of cards that she goes through. She has like a whole AI that controls her. Once the queen's on the board, there's a really good chance that you're probably going to lose.
Yeah, we didn't encounter her right away. And there are some rules for how the tokens come into the bag too now, where the queen won't come out right away. The queen token cannot go into the bag immediately with the way they balance it out. And and like Ryan said, there's a lot of differences that we haven't covered. There's a robot that you can find, and it's kind of not exactly effectively an additional character control, but kind of is. And there's a robot deck. There's a few different robot cards. You just randomly put one of these out, and you'll know that that's the robot that you can find somewhere. A lot of the room tiles have a robot icon. The first one you find, you add it there. And it gives you some other options. The robot's even carrying some stuff like oxygen and ammo that you might be able to take from it. So there's a lot of really cool things going on here. I think if you like Nemesis, this is going to give you a new enough experience. And I think for me, if I had to choose one, to me, this is doing more of the kind of things that I like. I love, even though you were discovering rooms in the old ones, I really like how they leaned into the exploration. Flipping over these exploration cards as we played was really a fun and exciting thing to like find, it's not going to give us the hallway where we want to go up here, but it's going to give us like maybe 4 hallways. So it became like this central room that we could use. And in our game, the robot we found in a room that was like the digging room or something, and we could use that room to have the robot create another corridor from whatever room it was in, which is really kind of cool. So I could do that to help Ryan out of a pinch, to help him get out of some place where he was maybe surrounded by intruders.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Like when you're trying to get across the board, like you're trying to get to like the C area for our objective, we know, and again, you can kind of see the numbers, the A, B, and C are letters. Trying to get there and finding those dead ends or finding paths that go up instead of east, like you end up having to kind of pivot your plan as you discover these room tiles. And it's very easy. Even if you're running parallel with someone, it might become a situation where your paths don't cross, which can be really tough if you're trying to like reconnect with somebody. So I think that alone, theme aside, ammo aside, fighting aside, that is the coolest thing for me that they added into this game.
Yeah, the game offers a lot for people who've played or haven't played in the past. So check out their campaign on GameFound. It should be launching, if it hasn't already, by the time we posted this video. But if you have any questions about the game at all, please make them in the comments below. We'll try to get down there and answer whatever we can as well. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.